One of the cheapest and easiest things you can do to help improve the ride quality and performance of your Jeep off-road is to let a little air out of your tires. This is what most people refer to as airing down, and it'll do wonders to help soften up your ride when driving over easy but rough terrain like desert mine trails and fire roads. It'll also help give your tires a much bigger footprint, and that'll make all the difference when driving over soft sand and deep snow. Last but not least, it'll help maximize the amount of traction your tires have by allowing them to wrap themselves around rocks and uneven obstacles. Now, letting air out of the tires is the easy part. The hard part is how to get it back in. And this is where a good air supply system can come in handy. I'm all out of love. I'm so lost without you. Not that kind of air supply. A good air supply system from an air compressor just like this one, made by ARB. Sure, there are bigger air compressors that you can get, but I've never really felt the need for one. I've been using one just like this for years, and it's been always more than enough, even for 40-inch tires. Of course, the benefit of having a nice compact air compressor is that it makes it a lot easier to install under the hood of a Jeep JL Wrangler or JT Gladiator, especially if you have one of my air compressor mounts. So, why under the hood? Mainly so you don't have to take up all kinds of valuable space inside your Jeep with something like a portable air compressor. Of course, if you've got a ProRock 44, ProRock 60, or any other aftermarket axle running an ARB air locker, it'll make it a lot easier to plumb and wire up. So in this short video, you'll get to see just how easy it is to install one of these and using one of these, an ACM or an air compressor mount that I make for both the JL Wrangler and the JT Gladiator. In order to make this all work, you will need to get yourself an air compressor pump kit, and if you want to install it remotely, you will need to get an extension line and a remote chuck air kit like you see here. Of course, everything that you see here can be purchased by clicking on the links in the description below. So let's get started on this install. And for my purposes, I'm going to begin by removing the driver's side front tire, as that'll make it a lot easier to show you what's going on underneath the fender. Ourselves a 22mm socket. Alright, just to help us to see what we're doing, I'm going to go ahead and open up the hood. Alright, so now we're going to grab our trim pry tool, and we're going to come down here. There's one push tab that we're going to need to remove. So you're going to just pry it out carefully. Get that out of the way. Alright, so now we can remove the 4 screws that are actually securing the fender to the body. There's one located right here past this little cutout, one in this hole here, one right here, and one right here. In order to remove them, you're going to need yourself a 10mm socket, one that's either long like this, a deep socket, or a short socket with an extension. Alright, so now that we have all the fasteners removed, we can go ahead and pull off the fender. And in order to do that, all you need to do is grab the fender from the front and about midway through and pull abruptly. Fortunately, I did pull off a couple clips. They didn't actually break, but they just slipped past. But it looks like all the other clips are okay. So now that we have that out, you can see there's a wiring harness here for the indicator lights. In order to remove it, we're going to pull this little red tab back and then squeeze. There we go. Now I'll set the whole fender aside. Now that we have both the fender and the fender liner removed, we can go ahead and grab this wiring harness, which is secured to the firewall with this little gray plug, and pull that out. Okay, so now using a 10mm socket yet again, we're going to go ahead and remove this nut. And we're going to loosen up this one here just a bit so that we can rotate this whole bracket downward. Now we can go ahead and tighten up this nut again. Alright, so let's take a look at the ACM and the hardware that comes with it. So as you can see here, these are 4 M6 serrated nuts. These are 2 4mm spacers, 1 6mm spacer, and 4 1/4x20 nuts and bolts. Alright, so now we can go ahead and mount the air compressor onto the ACM. And in order to do that, we're going to go ahead and use a 4mm Allen wrench, or in my case, I'm going to use a 4mm Allen bit, and we're going to remove these 2 screws. So now what that's going to allow you to do is to open this up so that you can get to all the mounting points on the bracket itself. Alright, so now we can go ahead and install the air compressor onto the ACM, onto these 4 points, and using these 4 1/4x20 bolts and serrated nuts. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the bolts and pass them through the hole like that. And then we'll take the air compressor and then secure it in place. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take ourselves a 7/16 inch wrench and a socket and tighten all the bolts in place. Okay. Set this aside for now. And grab our spacers that come with the kit. As you'll notice, there are 2 that are slightly thinner. These are 4mm spacers, and 1 thick 6mm spacer. So we're going to take our 6mm spacer and place it over the center pin that you see right here. Then we'll take our 2 4mm spacers, slide them onto these 2 pins right here. Alright, so in order to make this thing work, we're going to go ahead and loosen up these 2 bolts right here using a 4mm Allen wrench or bit like you see I'm using right now. And that's going to allow the entire barrel of this compressor to move up and down. So I'm actually going to tighten it up just a little bit, just to give it a little bit of tension. And that's going to allow us to give us more latitude as to where we can mount this. We're going to take this bracket, attach it to these 3 studs and the one beneath. Okay. Now we're going to take the 4 M6 serrated nuts that are provided with the kit and attach them to all the studs. There's one in the back, then one underneath here. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and take a 10mm socket. We're going to open up the compressor again, slide it out of the way, and tighten up whatever nuts we can using it. Okay. Alright, we're getting close to the point where we're about to wrap this thing up, and so now I'm going to go ahead and remove the plastic cap on top of the compressor. This is where the air filter goes. As you can see here, ARB provides this filter. Go ahead and screw that on. Okay. Now we can go ahead and position the compressor high enough so that this lower bracket will clear the frame rail and the brake lines, because the body will move up and down just a bit If you put it directly over, it's going to wind up making contact. We don't want that to happen. So we'll rotate it just slightly out of the way. The inner fender liner will come right around here and it'll clear the pump without any issues. Okay, so try to get this up as high as we can, up to the brake booster. You can go ahead and tighten these bolts down. So now we can take the 2 screws that we removed earlier and reinstall them. Alright, so as you can see here, this is pretty much how everything's going to look once all is said and done. All we need to do is plumb it for air and wire it up for electricity to get it to work. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go over here to our air compressor pump kit, which you have to buy separately. And this is going to be the air chuck for it, as well as right here's the manifold. Okay, so we're going to take this, and we're also going to go ahead back into our ARB box. We're going to need this guy right here, pressure switch. So I'm going to grab some Teflon tape, apply some onto the manifold itself. I'm going to go ahead and apply some onto the pressure switch as well. Alright, so now we can go ahead and pull this plug. Take our manifold and install it. And go ahead and use a 19mm wrench to get it tight. And you probably want to stop it so that this port up on top is facing upward. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take a 10mm wrench and we're going to loosen this bolt on the bottom of the cylinder here. So what that'll allow you to do is rotate the whole cylinder back and forth and independently the barrel up on top. Now these 2 ports right here are for the solenoids that would go to air lockers, and if you're going to be installing air lockers on your axles, this is probably the direction that I would point them out toward. Keep them away from the cat. As far as the manifold goes, we're going to have it pointing forward ultimately, but to work with it I'm going to take the pressure switch and install it here now. Go ahead and take a crescent wrench to tighten it up. We're going to rotate this to a position that we're going to want. Then we'll take our 10mm wrench, tighten it up again. So at this point in time, all you really need to do is go ahead and take your air chuck, put some Teflon tape on it, and thread it on to the end. Wire up the system and you're pretty much good to go. To access this point with your hose, there's a point along the fender liner that you can reach in and you can plug it in. I've done this, it works. Cheap, easy fix, you're done. For my purposes, I actually like having it so that I have a remote location somewhere about in front of the bumper. So that's what I'm going to be doing now. Okay, so these are the pieces that you're going to need to install a remote kit. Mainly this is the hose that you'll need. Go ahead and open this up. Now these do come in different lengths, and depending on where you want to be mounting it, you'll want to either get a longer one, or I don't know if they even come any shorter than this one. I think this is a 1 meter hose. And you'll see that this gets ran from right about here. I'll take it up and over the shock tower and then end it up somewhere up front. In order to make all that work, we're going to take this kit here and we're going to need this piece in order to make it happen. So what we're going to do is take our Teflon tape again, help ensure we don't have any leaks. Attach to the front, the manifold here. Then we're going to take our 14mm wrench and secure it in place. Okay. So now we can go ahead and install our line onto the fitting here, and as you can see there's a kind of a conical shape to it. This is called a compression fitting. Really, you won't need to use Teflon tape on this because this is essentially a brake line. We're just going to go ahead and tighten it on, and the 2 sides will compress onto each other and prevent any air from leaking. So I'm going to go ahead and thread this on now. And This is actually going to require a 14mm wrench as well. But in the event that you don't have a 14mm wrench, a 9/16 is basically the same thing. So, place this here, tighten that on. Wrap this up and over, through. Take it around in front of the grill. And down. Just want to make sure that it's out of the way of the steering shaft itself. Don't want it to be getting caught into the joint. That's about where we're going to have it. Alright, so this is the bracket that they provide. The chuck is designed to either install on any one of these larger circular holes. And ultimately, I think I'm going to go ahead and use this bolt right here and tie it into it. So I think I may need to straighten out this end because I'm not going to use these smaller holes to locate it. So I'm going to take it into a vise right now and straighten it out. Okay, so now we're going to take the air chuck that actually came with the relocation bracket, and now that we've straightened it out, we're going to go ahead and install it on this side right here. And use a wrench to tighten it in place. Okay, that looks pretty good. Okay, now go ahead and reinstall this here. So now we're going to take one of these angled compression fittings, right angled ones. I think we're good to go. Grab some zip ties here, secure everything in place, whatever we can. All right, I think we can wire it up now. Okay, let's see. Wiring. Now this wiring loom that ARB provides is actually designed to be used with these old school switches. But fortunately, our Gladiator came equipped with these auxiliary switches, and that's what we're going to be tying them into. Okay, so take off these twisty ties. Alright, so this is everything unwound. These wires right here are for the compressor itself. The red, black, and white ones right that you see right here will turn on the compressor. These are for the pressure switch. These two guys right here are for the solenoids that would activate lockers. As you can see, here's a large fuse for it, the relay connection, and then on the far end we have the leads that'll go to the battery itself. So these guys, I'm going to carefully place up and over, and we'll feed this side down. This relay connection, ideally, we're going to locate somewhere up high and pointing upward. So I'll probably just set this right here for now. And if we come down here, so again, these two plugs right here, these are for the lockers, if you have lockers. So we're not going to need those, but we're going to go ahead and take this connection right here and plug it into the compressor as such. And then we're going to take these two wires, this red and blue one, these are for the pressure switch. It doesn't matter which way they go, they're all going to work the same. So we'll go ahead and just connect them as such. Okay, so back up on top, we're going to grab our relay, plug this guy in. There's only one way to really plug it in because it's a keyed fit. So I'm going to go ahead and zip tie this relay in a place where I can service it in the future if I need to. Now we have our fuse in a location that we can access as well. Let's see, this will be for the switches. These all need to be connected to the battery. Okay, so I'm going to use the wiring that we have here on the ARB loom and use this plug that they have. This part right here normally goes on the inside of a Jeep, but we're not going to need to use this because we're going to be using the switches, or the auxiliary switches on this Gladiator. But I'm going to go ahead and try to align everything just in case, just give it a little extra shielding from the elements. So I'm going to use this as a sample of how I should hook everything up. So it looks like red and black go up on top. Okay, that's red and black, yellow and green. So if we were actually going to use this, it would all fit together and all the colors match. Once again, because we have the auxiliary switches on our Gladiator, we can look, oh, here they are. We can find this wiring loom, which is actually attached to the wires on the inside that go to the auxiliary switches. And if you reveal them by pulling back some of this electrical tape, you can see here are all the different switches. And if I recall, this tan one with the pink line, I'm pretty sure is switch number 1. This green and pink is 2, and this is 3 and 4. I can't remember which one is which, but I'll look that up in a second. So since we're just using an air compressor, we're going to tie our power, which is essentially this red wire right here. And we'll hook up the red wire to the auxiliary switch one, but let me verify that. Alright, so I just verified that this tan and pink is number 1, and that's what we're going to dedicate to the compressor. So I'm going to go ahead and take off this insulator. Just to make it easy, I'm going to go ahead and take a female spade terminal, just the crimp kind, that's ultimately going to get plugged into this point right here. As such, thread this on, take some crimps. Okay. These other 3 we're going to leave for another day. We can change this into lights. If we install air lockers in the future, we can set those up as well. For now, we're just going to go ahead, connect this to the red wire, because the red wire is what's going to power up the air compressor. There, just like that. Perfect. Tuck these guys in. Now we can worry about wiring these guys up. So these are 2 ground leads. We're going to attach them to obviously the ground on the battery. And this is the power lead. So, cool. Wire terminals. It's almost moment of truth. We're going to go ahead and take our 12mm wrench. We're going to find the terminal. This one right here looks like it's open on the positive battery post. Open that up. So we'll go ahead and attach that. So now we can take our 10mm wrench and loosen up this terminal on the battery. That's tightened. Make sure that's tightened. Alright, so I wasn't totally happy with the way things were set up. Initially I was thinking I could bring the wiring around the back side of the battery, but everything was a little bit short, so I kind of tidied things up. I kind of ran it down and along this side of the battery, and as you can see, you can't hardly see any of the wires at all. I'm going to go ahead and tighten things up now. So you can see, looks great. And that's pretty much it. Everything's wired and plumbed, everything's installed. All I need to do now is turn on the switch and see if we have any air leaks, which is a possibility. Let's go see how it works. All right, now this is the moment of truth. Got my key, put it to the run position, auxiliary 1. I hear an air compressor. Let's go see if we have any leaks. So the compressor's been on ever since I got out of the Jeep, and so far I haven't heard the compressor recharge, which is a good sign. I'm gonna go ahead and take some soapy water now and spray all the connections just to see if there's any bubbles, and if there are, then those are areas that we need to address. Nothing there. Nothing there. I think we're golden. All right, now we can go ahead and close everything up and reassemble our fender and put our tire back on and call it a day. And that's it. And just like that, we now have an onboard air system that's always at the ready and without having to take up any additional space inside the cabin of our Jeep. And because I know there are going to be more than a few of you who are wondering, it takes about 2.5 minutes to air up a 37 1250 tire from 15 to 30 psi. For those of you who are interested in purchasing an air compressor mount for your Jeep JL Wrangler or JT Gladiator, be sure to check the description below for a link to buy one now.